why do we have everything, uh, you know, revolves us in matters of art and design and innovation? Because we are just another tiny element on this planet, and nature is so much more powerful than us. And you can see it. Like, look at this mycelium, like this one cellular beings, and they are so smart. So, I mean, I feel a lot of peace of mind, I would say. I feel a lot of sense of purpose. I feel way more aligned with myself and my environment. And it has definitely helped me navigate a lot of tough times in my life. Like there were days, and it's also a very meditative process, making biomaterials. It takes so much patience, and you spend so much days alone and just with that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tiny Farm Friends podcast. Hope you guys had a great start to the new year. In a world where everybody is trying to sell something, our guest today is a true artist who is in a quest of meaning and authenticity. She is giving her ideas shape and body while at the same time pondering what it means to be a creator in the times we live in. Rushati Chowdhury is a visual artist, a material designer, and a maker working at the intersection of science and art. She is trained in textile design. Before starting her own material practice, she has worked across fashion accessories and material innovation in India, Italy, China, and Germany. She aims to give a new definition to traditional craftsmanship and visual arts, explore new biomaterials, and push the limits of the matter that nature has provided us with. We are in complete awe of her work. In this podcast, we talk about a variety of topics ranging from fast fashion, algorithm driven design, biomaterials, even to philosophy of life and death. We hope you enjoy this conversation. So before we dig into your work and
Yeah.
bioplastics, can you maybe tell us about yourself and your background?
Yeah, okay. So it's been a bit of a ride. So I was studying textile and material design, basically industrial design, from NID, National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad. And while I was there, I did an exchange semester in Germany. And then after graduating, I kind of worked in the fashion industry in India, in China, in Italy. And then I went to do my master's in Italy. It was actually in fashion, but like haute couture, which is like very high fashion, very customized, handcrafted high fashion, like the best that Italy has to offer, kind of masters. So it was, kind of a work master's. So we got to kind of study in the context of the fashion industry and the textile industry. And then after I graduated from there, I started working with a research lab, which is like a multidisciplinary innovation lab. And now I'm absolutely working independently as a material artist, mostly with sculptures and installations at the intersection of science and art, and mostly with biomaterials, So.
Got it. So, like, how was your experience working for, say, different brands during your master's and in between? And, like, how did you end up working
Right.
with bioplastics in the first place?
Right. Honestly, anyone who's working in the fashion industry right now is quite aware of how things are kind of in the process of changing. And the fashion industry has been for some years picking up, some designers trying out new things, trying out new materials, sometimes mostly for the, sake of aesthetics and mostly for visual design, because fashion is mostly visual design. So I was kind of aware of what's going on. And then when I was in China, I specifically worked with this brand. And they are a very young, very street wear brand, and they're also into sustainability. So with them, I was kind of working on new materials, not biomaterials, but kind of upcycling, textile waste textiles and like transforming them into things more fashionable. Then what happened when I was in Rome and I was doing my master's? So Italy, it's known for its opulence and it's known for its maximalism when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
textile and fashion, and it's known for its culture. Their heritage, their craft in the silk weaving, leather. So Italy is kind of still the hub of materials when it comes to luxury fashion. So like all these brands, they really come to Italy for their fabrics and their leather. So in Italy, there is like quiet revolution that's happening, like an underground revolution that's happening where
Mm-hmm.
people are starting to, work with different materials, starting to come up. You have to, remember this is the land of Renaissance as well, new
Right.
ideas. So what happened was like I was at the forefront of haute couture, and I was at the forefront of this textile industry in Italy. And I kind of was very lucky that I got to know a lot of these people who are working with alternative techniques and materials. So I just got really interested. And I remember we had like a small internship in between, like a summer internship, and everyone really decided to go for the embroidery and silk weaving, the traditional textiles. And I chose to
Mm-hmm.
work with people who are working with biofabrication and digital fabrication, which is basically using more technology to create fabrics and
Right.
structures. And I just got really interested in it, and then yeah, it just one thing led to the other, and I ended up working with biomaterials.
Fascinating. So you talked about like the fashion brand trying to recycle stuff. So that brings me to the question that like how wasteful actually is the fashion industry, and how
Yeah.
much responsible are the top brands, or do you think that the yarn manufacturers, the chemical pigment manufacturers, even us as
Mm-hmm.
consumers, are we equally
Mm-hmm.
responsible?
Yeah, you know what, Raghav? Like, this is something I have thought of and assessed and reassessed all my time, like, since I started basically studying or working in the creative field. And my answer might change 5 years from now. If you ask me, I would be knowing more. But standing where I am now today, I would say it's the people who are really to be blamed are the ones that are running the system, the politicians, the corporates, the ones that are dictating how the system should run. I'll tell you why, because it's not that black and white. It's not that easy to say, oh, as a fashion brand, why are you not being sustainable, or like stop fast fashion? It's not that easy. So what happens is in fashion, like in any contemporary culture, there is this theory of trickle down, right? So the big brands, the big houses, they have the luxury and the money and, the brains to create something really beautiful, and then it trickles down kind of. And so what has happened right now is that, say for example, I see a lot of like this fashion editorials. They would talk about how fast fashion is really bad and it's polluting the planet. Absolutely it is. And like, let me just say, fashion industry and textile industry is one of their highest pollutants, like polluting industry. Like the carbon footprint is immense. I'll get to that in a while. So what happens is they say, oh, fast fashion is bad, and that's not the end of, because what happens is you are creating this aspiration, all these like advertisements and branding and influencer marketing, and every time you're scrolling your Instagram, you're seeing like
Yeah.
50 new designs, and also social media has become really democratic. So all of this is like really at our fingertips. So what is happening is you're creating this aspiration for people, and not everyone can afford to spend money on good design. So of course they're going to go to fast fashion brands. And I feel like everyone deserves that dignity to have good things. Everyone does that.
Yeah.
It's like you can't just say just because you can't afford doesn't mean you can't wear something nice that makes you feel good or makes you look good. So what happens is, so this is, you see, like it's a broader, like a more complex problem than just
Mm-hmm.
saying this is good and this is bad. Then, for example, like I'm just giving you some like case studies,
Right.
some very specific case studies. So then, like this fast fashion brands, they mostly make their products in the sweatshops in Bangladesh, in India, in Pakistan, which is like really poor condition of working. But those people, the workers that work there, they don't have good union. They don't have a political system to give them an alternative career or an alternative choice to walk out from that. So they're stuck to that system. So that's why I'm saying, the blame, it's not on us consumers and like some and designers as much as it is on the people who are really like running, like I don't want to
Right.
sound like a conspiracy theorist, but like the ones that are at
Yeah, I
the
get your
top of
point.
things. And that's why I feel like whenever we talk about sustainability in fashion, I want to have like someone who studies economics joining the discussion, or someone who is into international law or politics, because it's a broader problem. And in general, like if we're just talking about fashion and how wasteful it is absolutely wasteful. It is like, I know so many big brands that have like burnt their stock, thrown away their stock, but they have made new products because they have to. Because we are in a very like fast paced consumeristic environment now. That is definitely a problem. And that's not, you can't blame the consumers on that, because they have been tuned to behave like that. That's why
Right.
advertisements are there. So, they're selling it to you. They're selling those ideas to you. So what happens is, like, it was always there, like this aspirational thing that I'm talking about. Like, every generation has had like contemporary culture kind of inspired them in the way they dress or in the way they behave. So it's always been there, but it's never been this fast. It's never been at your fingertip constantly. So for example, earlier, like every brand used to have two collections in a year: spring, summer, autumn, winter. And in India, it would usually be like, around Diwali, it's like a pan Indian festival time. You'll get like one collection, and probably in summer, you like the New Year's around the country, you'll get a new collection.
Right.
And in the West, it was spring, summer, autumn, winter. And now it's like every 2 weeks, if you go to a store, you'll have a new collection. And earlier you would probably you'll see the advertisement like in a magazine, or you'll see like a movie and you see this, actress wearing this dress, so you kind of like it. And like I said, now we have social media, now we have Instagram influencers, now we have the models, and these brands use them as the tool to market that idea that you constantly need new things. Every time you refresh, there's something new. So also what happens is devaluing the value of your clothes. And that's why, if you can't really blame the designers, you can't really blame the yarn manufacturers, because they're just staying alive in the system. If today there is like a guy, say, who weaves Banarasi saris, okay, and he sees like there is like a sari to weave it, it takes a lot of time. That's why, in the
Right.
earlier days, our grandmothers would have like this one good sari that they will have,
Yes.
like one good Banarasi, one good, Kanjivaram. Now they see that, people want something every day or every month. So they would resort to doing things that are a bit like, they would probably dye their yarn in an acid dye or something which is faster. They would, resort to things that will be quicker. So that's what, it's a very, very complex situation, but it's also very, like, I think it's about time people really start talking about it.
Right. So, like, also, although like some fashion brands are trying to become sustainable, and sustainability has become a buzzword,
Yeah.
or it is also a very
Oh, yeah.
complex topic, right? So, say for example, how far do these efforts, like using organic cotton, or say
Mm.
recycled PET bottles in making your fabric or your products, how
Yeah.
far do these efforts go, and do they really solve the problem, or do they only perpetuate our dependence on, say, fossil based polymers?
Right. You know what I'll tell you is that no material is bad. Even plastic has been so useful in so many things. We
Right.
really have so many things, we can't really live without it. So no material is bad, but again, the problem comes down to the system. So, if we have these brands that are making organic clothes or using absolutely, natural materials, that's brilliant. That's beautiful. But the problem is the quantity that they're producing. The problem
Right.
is that they're also keeping up with the pressure from the market. And I think, like, we were, talking about that
Yeah.
article that says, like, an organic tote bag, you need to, that's what I know. And you need to use it for like some 30,000 times, like use it and wash it and use it and wash it to actually make it, how do I say, like,
Decomposable, I think.
degradable, biodegradable.
Biodegradable.
Because it's not like, we don't think about that, like, just like that, I'm wearing an organic cotton top. I can't just throw it in the soil and it'll just like dissolve in it. That's not how it works. It's a
Mhm.
process, it's a long process. And even natural things take quite a lot of time to biodegrade. Like, not everything happens at the same time. So I feel like that's the problem, because I feel now, if we have like 20,000 brands all doing absolutely good in organic cotton, then that doesn't solve the problem either. Then, because we are having so much. And like I said, again, you have to also think of all this in context to this marketing trend, in context to this consumerism that these big markets are producing, they are
Mhm.
initiating. So it's, I mean, it's a bit of I would say it is like sustainability is used as a greenwashing method. Like, I have gone to stores, seen like clothes that has the tag that they're very sustainable and they're green and everything. And then I've gone under that label that says what it's made of, and it's made of like rayon or nylon and stuff. So I think the awareness really needs to come also individually, because that could be one small step in countering this, to really understand if just because you're buying into something organic doesn't mean you need to buy so much. But then again, who am I to tell someone not to buy? That's I don't want to comment on that. It's not
Right.
my place.
So, but now,
Yeah.
like, would you agree that today's design and designers are like working more on the aesthetics than utility? And how do you see the role of young designers, especially in the fashion industry?
Hmm. Okay, so like the first, I'll answer the question in two parts. Okay,
Yeah.
because the first part, it reminded me of this. Recently, I was reading an article that said, why do all the products of our times, they all look the same?
Hmm.
Like, they all have that very similar ergonomics, this like rounded edges, kind of this matte finish, kind of like a contrast and then a bland color. So it was very
Right.
interesting because it said, again, like, if I may come back to the social media aspect of things, because it's so relevant right now,
Hmm.
because our algorithm decides a lot for us. Our algorithm decides a lot of trends for us. If you go to Pinterest and you type like good products, you'll see very similar looking things, regardless if they're good or not.
Yeah.
So, and even if you go to like all these design editorials on Instagram, you look through their timeline, they all have very similar looking products. Because what has happened is, suddenly, how you look, how things look has become very important in the age of Instagram, in the age of Tumblr and everything. So, and this has absolutely shaped designs in such a way, like, I see it, the difference in, like, when I graduated NIT, Instagram was just like starting, we were still putting up pictures like with our friends and, not really caring how things look. But now, if I see the way the young students work, it's, you could see like the way they would take that picture, the way they would choose their colors. It's so much like the factor of how it's gonna look has become so much more important, because that's what happens. And this is something that No, I'm just talking about these young students, but also big brands. It's happening everywhere. Because what matters is how much the algorithm is choosing you, because that will dictate how well received you'll be, how well received your design will be, and everything. So coming to your question, yes, like how a thing looks has become way more important. And that's why, sometimes you will see these buzzwords, like, you will see these posts that have like, oh, this designer made this. And it's like a very flashy, like a kind of a headline with a picture. You just like stay on it for 2 seconds, you give it a like. How many of us actually go back to the article or to see actually what that product is, or is it actually useful, or does it actually make sense? We don't. So, and in context of fashion industry, of course, it has become so much more about, well, fashion and textiles were always a bit more on the art side of design, I would say, because aesthetics always really mattered. But like a lot of these brands now have are under this they're obliged to make it look good, they're obliged to make it look attractive, so you, when you're scrolling down, you have your attention on it regardless of what
Right.
the material is, or actually if it is good or not. So that's why we have a lot of designers who are very you would say bizarre, but that has always been a part of fashion, because a part of fashion is also very theatrical. It's also very art. It's not always about your wearability, but yeah, I mean, you could like, see that balance is getting a bit lost now, because it
Yeah, I
doesn't
mean,
matter who is going to wear your clothes as long as it's featured on something or getting all these likes. Yeah.
yeah, I can totally agree with you. And like that is a very important point that you brought up, that today's design is very much driven by the algorithms. I could say the same for, say, even the
Yeah.
construction or
Mhm.
interior design industry. Because like if we say
Absolutely.
compare to
Absolutely.
older times, we had movements like, or like Renaissance movement, or say Art Deco, Art Nouveau.
You're
Right
right.
now, every
Yeah.
month, or say like every 2 months, designs are changing. Say right now, you could see that
Yeah.
Ratan check pattern everywhere, like being used, and that's
Yeah,
like,
I know, right? It's the one major thing driving everything today. Trust me, and that's why the big brands are known for their craftsmanship and known for their storytelling and known for their uniqueness to stand out. They are all doing things, and they are paying the Instagram influencers to market their clothes, because even for them it's become so important that they appear on the algorithm. Like they have
right.
this trending products, like products that are going to break the internet. These words come up.
Mhm.
One more thing I want to add in terms of like this, how visuals have suddenly become way more important. And I would say like also because you really have to see this, and I'm sure you're going to get it as well, how much design has changed in the last few years. And that's why like look at product design now. Like most of product design, architecture, most of it has become about system design,
Right.
because you don't have as many products as before. Like all your products are in one phone. So what do? You design the system, you design the UI UX, which is, there's nothing wrong with it. But what happens, like also there's this new influx of motion design, motion graphics, 3D, all those cinema 4D kind of design, which is huge. Like I see everyone doing it, and which is brilliant. Like I think that's amazing. But what happens is then, of course, when you're making something tactile, you're making something with your hand versus you're making something with Cinema 4D, the latter will have way more chances of looking more attractive, looking more appealing, especially on the screen, especially for the algorithm. So what happens? Like, are we going towards a future where we are only going to have everything digital? Like, are we going to stop having anything tactile? And I make these observations and questions, especially coming from an industrial design background, because I see that shift. I see that shift of people shifting more towards digital design, things that look really nice on screen, which is good.
Mm.
Again, I'm not like, discoursing it, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's an important point, and I think we could like have a complete podcast on that topic with NFTs coming
Yeah.
in. Facebook
Oh
planning to
yeah,
have
yeah.
metaverse. So yeah, like a lot of things would
Right,
like
right.
become more
That's like
digital.
a whole, yeah,
Yeah. But
whole
at
thing.
the same
But
time, it highlights like how disconnected we have become with the materials itself, right? Because we've been designing on
absolutely.
screens, and as aesthetics like take the front seat,
Mm-hmm.
we
Yeah.
don't actually like think about the life cycle of the materials, or like
No.
we want to achieve that matte finish, but we don't know like
Right.
what toxics or VOCs we
Exactly.
are producing for achieving
Exactly.
that particular matte finish.
Yeah. Even the ergonomics, even like how you're going to use it. Is it going to be usable? And I've seen this in fashion designers as well.
Mhm.
Just because they want it to look a certain way, they're not seeing how the materials are going to react to my body. Are they going to, stay with gravity? Are they going to feel good to wear? All these things have majorly gone out of the window. It's all about how it looks. It's all about, yeah, I mean, that's why, what's happening is there's more and more people are having such a disconnect. They're having such an, like, they don't have that understanding of how materials really behave. Something that us, when we grew up and we studied, that was like one of our fundamentals in
Yeah.
understanding. Like, materials really like shaped everything else for us. So yeah, there is a major
So,
disconnect.
so what was the pivotal moment in your life when you decided that, yeah, like I don't want to take up the conventional path in fashion, and like I want to
Mm-hmm.
work with say biomaterials, and how did you go about, like starting your journey working with say
Mm-hmm.
bioplastics?
Well, I would say it really happened when I was finishing my master's in Rome. And I think what happened is by then I had worked in the fashion industry, but also across all the spectrums of fashion industry, like worked with absolute like craftspeople in India to this new age thing in Shanghai to Italy, which is known for its, traditional fashion textile. So I worked across all of it and I kind of had a burnout. I kind of got very disillusioned, Mostly, I would say because I was very guilty of contributing to a system that's creating so much of the environmental crisis that we are in right now. Like, it's absolutely one of the major contributors of that. So I was very guilty about it. I thought like I would be a hypocrite if I keep caring for the environment and at the same time, be a part of the problem. And I would say I was disillusioned by the system because, like, let me say, I love fashion. I love crafting that. I love researching and designing and making it. And most of my work is still very hand done. I love that fact that fashions even now is one of the remaining industries where people mostly work with hands. So I loved it, but it was the system that eventually I realized, like, and it is such a monster. Like, the system, it's a gigantic monster. There's because so much stakeholders, there's so much money and being brought in to keep the system running, that I felt like I won't be able to be happy or make a change in this, because you need to have a lot more power or money or privilege to make a change in something like the fashion industry. So I kind of had a burnout, and at the end of my masters, I was still like, I thought I'm gonna make that shift from fashion to something more holistic and more uh, like more integral. But what happened was I was still, I had these job interviews lined up in Italy, and I had a couple of job offers, and I didn't think I'll make the change so fast. But the pandemic happened then. And I know it's been like a very tough time for everyone, but for once at that moment, I thought it was a sign from the universe that everything stopped and all this, job interviews kind of fell apart and stuff. So I was anyway working on my own on, integrating materials with a bit of innovation, a bit of tech and stuff. So then I got in touch with this lab, like this innovation lab, and they kind of asked me, they were having kind of gone, like, they already had a biomaterial department, but this time they were kind of actually putting in a lot more work and money in it. So they kind of invited me to come work with them, And I was like, yes, why not? It worked out for me. Yeah, from there.
So, but there are
But
like so
mostly I'm really self-taught.
yeah, but there is a variety of biomaterial that you could work on. Like, why did bioplastic catch your attention in the first
Mm-hmm.
place?
Right. Okay. So, firstly, what happened was bioplastic was something that always fascinated me because the first time I heard about it, I couldn't believe it. Because I was like, how can plastics be biodegradable? How can plastics be made from biological matter? Because all my life I knew plastic as this completely like bad, like petroleum based thing. So it really caught my attention as something that sounds really challenging. So then, and I got like very obsessed with figuring out how that's possible and what are the advantages, disadvantages, extremes of it. Secondly, what happened is, of course, I'm also an artist, so a lot of it was driven by the kind of, how would I say, like the kind of mind space I had at that time with my art, because these materials, this bioplastic, they're also very fascinating. They have such character. I was always like, I was working on this interplay of light and color and shadows and optical illusion, and I thought that was such a versatile material to work with as an installation art. So both. So it's not just the aesthetics, but it was also the like the usability and the usefulness of it. So it was a combination of all of that. So there was, at the same time, I was working on eggshell materials. I was working on uh, natural dyes. Yeah, and yeah, mostly those. But I think I really focused on bioplastics. Yeah, for all these reasons.
Fascinating. So before we actually like dig deeper into the artwork that you created, I would like love to know like what all materials like have you experimented so far in creating a bioplastic, and what are some ingredients that go into creating the
Right.
bioplastics?
Okay, yeah. So bioplastics are like mostly, there can be like a lot of different types. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it. I have experienced mostly with seaweed, like different kinds of seaweed extracts. I have worked with animal gelatin and plant-based gelatin. Um, and like with animal gelatin, of course, like very different types of like fish gelatin and uh, gelatin coming from this meat industry, like the surplus, like the bones that they throw away. So I've experimented with gelatin. I have experimented with potato starch, with cornstarch. Actually, the one with cornstarch works really well also for 3D printing. Do you know, like the filaments that they make?
Awesome. Nice.
It's brilliant. You can 3D print with that bioplastic actually. What else? No, with bioplastic, mostly these. And amongst like the seaweed, I have experimented with like a range of seaweeds. Like, so there are different seaweeds having different properties that coming from. So yeah, mostly these.
Got it. So how similar are the properties of bioplastic with traditional plastic, and what challenges do you still see like that I'm sure there is a long way to like making them
Oh
commercialized and
yeah,
scaling them, but what other
yeah.
challenges do you see when it comes to creating
Um.
bioplastics?
So like the similarities, I think the idea was always to mimic plastic and not become plastic, because we are not trying to be plastic. So the similarities are, obviously, I would start with how the material feels and how it looks. It's very similar to plastic. A lot of the bioplastic, not all of it, but a lot of it is water resistant till a certain degree. Like you can have these certain bioplastics from seaweed where you can store water for some time before it decomposes. Then a lot of these plastics are perfect for the using for the use of single use plastics, basically, the kind of wrappers. And when you go to these cafes and they give your fork and knife in a
Yeah.
plastic wrapper, also on the planes. So those that you throw away and you don't really need to use it much. It's really good for that. It does have that protection that plastic offers, but to a certain degree, as far as I know, like of course, like a PP kit. I'm not sure if it can be yet made from bioplastic. I don't know if it will protect. It will give that protection for that much, or even that range of protection. But I'm sure like you can cover like your spoons and your sandwiches and that kind. If you could use bioplastic, bioplastics also can be used for 3D printing. They're not very strong yet, but the point is, when we work on 3D printings in the design industry, we make a lot of prototypes, which usually also goes to waste a lot of it. So those you could definitely do with bioplastic. So you're not like putting more plastic in the world, which is not going to be used. And then the bigger thing you make with like whatever materials you're making, even good plastic. So I feel like that's something I really found, very interesting about this bioplastic, because I feel like, again, I said like no material is bad. Even plastic isn't bad if you use it well, if you use it for a long time. The problem is we have a lot of disposable plastic, which we dispose of really fast. So if that could be countered, and it's of course it's like a research in process, and there are like still like a lot of challenges we are coming up with. Like for example, some of the bioplastics I made, I realized they don't really thrive in this Indian climate that we have, because there's so much moisture. It kind of makes it a bit limp. So some bioplastics, because they're also they're made from a biological, like cellular matter, gelatin or seaweed. Some of them you really have to see how good they are before you introduce it into in a food environment. So it's kind of a ongoing research, but I do know for a fact they could help us counter so much of the problems we have with disposable plastic, for sure.
Yeah, in fact, even in the biomaterial industry, say when it comes to mycelium, I remember us talking about that. That still, like while trying to say inoculate mycelium, we use a lot
Right.
of single-use
Yes. Yes.
plastic, and like
Mm-hmm.
how we could like different designers could exchange ideas and come up with solutions so that you maybe grow
Absolutely.
mycelium by covering it with say bioplastics.
Exactly. Yes. 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 Yeah, and it's very possible, I'll tell you, because there are bioplastics which are very, like, they would trap that moisture in, which is
Hmm.
needed for the mycelium.
Right.
So, exactly, like for all these purposes. But, one of the problems is it's a process that's hand done again, so there are limitations to how much you can make. It's not,
Yeah.
done by a machine. But like some of the bioplastic is actually done by machine, like cornstarch bioplastic and potato bioplastic. They have started making it like machine, but a lot of it, like
Interesting.
seaweed bioplastic, it's absolutely artisanal. Like you have to cook it, you have to make it.
Right. So, like, can you also like walk us through the journey of the beautiful artwork you created, Your Mind After Midnight, and what was the inspiration
Well,
behind
thank you
it?
so much. Thank you for calling it beautiful. And it was, so I would say it started even before I started working on this bioplastic in this lab. If you see some of my textile sculptures before that, and they're also on my Instagram before.
Right.
So I was working a lot with the concept of sleep paralysis and nightmares and dreamscapes, especially in a pandemic. Because I was reading and I was going through like as soon as the pandemic happened, I was going through a lot of trouble with sleeping and with being in this tiny room all by myself, and I was away from my family. I was in a whole different country. There was
Right.
we completely lost track of what we knew of what life has always been like. And so I started, and I get a lot of sleep paralysis, so even for a while now. So I started reading about how people are sleeping in this pandemic.
Hmm.
How our dreams are being affected. What are we hallucinating? What are we dreaming of? What are our nightmares like? So that was the driving inspiration behind this installation. And one of the interesting things, if you could see, it's not about how the bioplastics look like in light, and but also about when it's dark and you put like a light on it, the shadows they
Mhm.
create, kind of like. So the idea was to not just look at it on a surface level, but to dig inside these realms of, when we're talking about some things like dreams and nightmares, they don't have anything much tactile form or shape. They're kind of realms of beings which are somewhat in between what is real and what is like subconscious. So that was also the idea for, and I wanted the installation to be interactive. So we had all these lights, so people could come and play around and see how the shadows are changing, and so you kind of get an idea about how it's like to stay inside a room day in and day out in the pandemic at night, when you probably have like some of these neon lights in your house or these yellow lights, and you're kind of like dreaming or having your nightmares, or even having your um, good times, bad times, both. But what it is like to have all of that happening inside a room in your mind after you go to sleep, basically, in a nutshell.
Yeah, super intriguing.
That's what it was.
But I would also like to know from you, like, how your perception about life and death has changed after working with biomaterials.
I was I was just gonna talk about it, like how did you know this is this was like absolutely something I was gonna talk about. I mean, I would say, and that's, it's interesting, if we were in an utopian situation where, we are not in a climate crisis, I think I would have still worked with biomaterials, because I felt it it's very fascinating that I'm working with something that's coming from this earth, coming from this planet, that is also what has made me. Like, we are all made of this
Yeah,
carbon particles, and so
yeah.
is everything that I am working with. And especially this, like, since last year, like, so many people, I'm sure we have experienced so much personal loss, and we have seen it around us so much. And I also went through recently, like, some months of like my personal loss in my family. And I would actually, used to write this. So when I was doing my installation, I used to write like a journal. So I used to write this, how I felt so much. First of all, like, just the acceptance of death, because, I was working with things that had come, like from a dead plant or a dead animal. And here I am giving it another life. So in death, it is leaving, it's being something else, so it doesn't end there. In our religion, we believe that, when we die, we kind of become a part of the universe, of the matters around us. So it was a very, I've always been a material designer and a material artist, but it was a very spiritual understanding of the material I'm working with. It also, I would say, humbled me down, because I would say it also made me realize about how tiny we are in the matter of, in the grand scale of things, and how, someday, we would also have the same fate as this materials I'm working on. But it was also nice to know that it doesn't end there. Your life, once you die, doesn't really end there, because it's a constant cycle that goes on and on. And now that I'm working with mycelium, I feel it even more. We
Mhm.
watched Fantastic Fungi. Of course, you watched
Yes,
it, and that life cycle that goes on, and it's. I feel so nice, because I feel like I'm so much in tuned with this planet, because it's such a beautiful planet, and I feel every day so grateful to have had this life, to perceive, like, aren't we lucky to be born on this beautiful planet? You know,
definitely.
and I feel like, I read Carl Sagan, and you read all about all these astronauts, and when they go out in space, and they're like, you'd really understand how good we have it once you go out and you have nothing but space, and no environment and nothing. And it's interesting because, before this, like, if you see my early works, probably you won't see them because I don't have them online. I used to work with a lot of neutral tones. I used to work with a lot of blacks. I'm a Bengali. We have a very muted sense of aesthetics since, forever. But I think I've opened my eyes to things that my professors would even consider to be because they're such acidic colors. They're so bright. Because I'm like, my God, I'm so lucky to even perceive this range of colors. Imagine if I was born as a different animal, I wouldn't be seeing the world the way I'm seeing it
Yeah.
now. So it's definitely given me a sense of absolutely, I was working in such commercial spaces before that. The fashion industry, textile industry, they're very commercial. They're very like you're very profit driven all the time. You're very human driven all the time. I would say like your clients are humans. You're making, and for once, my colleagues are nature basically, and I'm completely shifted from being around humans to being more around nature. About the fact that why do we have everything uh, you know revolves us in matters of art and design and innovation, because we are just another tiny element on this planet, and nature is so much more powerful than us, and you can see it. Like, look at this
Mm.
mycelium, like this one cellular beings, and they are so smart. So, I mean, I feel a lot of peace of mind, I would say. I feel a lot of sense of purpose. I feel way more aligned with myself and my environment. And it has definitely helped me navigate a lot of tough times in my life. Like there were days, and it's also a very meditative process, making biomaterials. It takes so much patience, and, you spend so much days alone and just with that. And yeah, I mean, I have really learned to accept and marvel at this beauty of existing a lot more.
Actually, the Carl Sagan theory of the tiny dot that they see from that was one of the inspirations for us also to
Right?
name the
Yeah.
podcast Tiny Farm Friends and our lab as Tiny
Hmm.
Farm Lab.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
and
Now this
also
makes it so much more special.
yeah, also it's so fascinating, when you study about these tiny organisms who work as living factories and how much they could create and like how much more intelligent they are from us. So
Hmm.
that is like a total different. All
Exactly.
these tiny organisms could like just like
Yeah, exactly. And can I
do
just
their
add
thing.
something?
Yeah, please.
So, like, when I started working with this, I realized that this planet has given us so much. Like, the mechanism that this planet has built, it's so much. So, why are we creating things new when we already have so much that we can work with? Like, it's funny because, like how we have this amazing system of trapping carbon dioxide from the environment by the plants and then breaking it down into the carbons that go into
Mhm.
our food. I mean, this is like a wonderful mechanism. Like, it's almost like someone with a brain came up with it. And I saw this tweet by someone I'm not going to name, someone very famous, a billionaire, who was
I know what
organizing
you're
like a
going to talk
competition
about
to,
it. Yeah, I just
you know, who we're
read about
talking
it
about.
yesterday, and I was super
No.
fascinated. In a way, it is a good thing, and but like on the other side of it, like you really think like we have come down so far that we have to have such things, like
Yeah, that's true. But no, what was funny is because he organized a competition where he said someone who would come up with the best idea to remove carbon dioxide from the air. And I think someone retweeted and said, "Did you try planting trees?" And it was so funny because, it just really shows the solution is there. Like, nature has given us everything we need,
Mhm.
but we just don't see it.
Right. Great. So, like, how were you as a kid? Like, were you equally fascinated about biology and chemistry, or now you are much more interested in nature now?
I was a very curious kid, I'll tell you that, Raghav. I was always like very fascinated with everything. I think I grew up reading a lot of National Geographic magazines with my grandfather at that time,
Wow, that's
and
beautiful.
he was also a man who was very, curious about everything and had a lot of books. And I was very curious. I was also very alone. I would say, I'm a single child, and I would spend a lot of time by myself.
Mhm.
Exploring things. I used to go to the mountains a lot, so I was amongst nature a lot. I was trying to build a telescope to see the stars. I was always that kid, but I wasn't very good in this subjects in school. Like I wasn't, because what happened was I couldn't. My brain somehow couldn't process all this in a very dry academic format. So I was very curious, but I wasn't into too much of like learning by memorizing and that stuff. I wasn't. So actually, I was very bad in biology and chemistry in my school. But inside me, I was always like, I liked it, but I wasn't good at it.
Got it. Interesting. And now, since you're also back at doing your art, and how do you see your role as an artist? Like trying to create a discourse or spreading awareness
Mm-hmm.
with, say, biomaterials, or shifting people
Mm-hmm.
from, say, a linear economic model to a circular economic model. What is the role of art in this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'll be honest. I don't think I'll alone be able to solve so many of these problems that
Hmm.
we discussed, and all the problems that we face now. I never even thought. I never had the savior complex. That's all I'm gonna say. I
I
never
see.
thought I'm like being the savior of the world. But I would at the same time say what I'm doing, I feel happy to also share it with others, because I feel it's definitely creating a discourse. I do see so many of my contemporaries, so many of my people I've studied with in the past, kids, young kids, they come to me, they DM me all the time. They're like, "This is so nice. We never knew something like that could exist," or "How do you do this?" or "I want to do this. What should I do?" And I feel like even the fact that, see, my art is something I love to do, and the fact that it's also sparking a conversation that's beyond just the art of it. And who knows, these conversations and this interest could give rise to so many new people who would do things, and they will have their own vision, and then they will take biomaterials and this circular approach to design ahead in their own way. And that's how you create a ripple effect. I mean, someday I was inspired by someone else who did biomaterials, but probably in a different way. Probably they do something else with it, but I was inspired by it. And I plan to do that. I plan to absolutely show the fact that even art can be something that could be made from biomaterials, and it doesn't have to be the traditional materials. I mean, what I want to, as a very philosophical part of me, I want to do is anything that I'm creating, because again, I'm creating something real. It's not just digital. I'm creating something tactile. So anything I'm creating, I don't want it to go back and harm the planet. That's simply my philosophy, I would say. So for me, biomaterials are my medium to work as an artist, and it's interesting because I get to research and I get to create something new.
Definitely. But have you like set some dreams ahead? Like, do you want to keep practicing this as an art, or do you also want to maybe say create some products or like a fashion line or something
Products,
like that?
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Ah, I've been thinking about this a lot. See, I think it was a very somewhat conscious decision to like when I started working with biomaterials like bioplastics in Rome, and I was working like it wasn't just me. There were 3, 4 people, and they came from different backgrounds, so we were doing our own things. So it was a very conscious decision on my part to not do a product and work on something more experiential and more spatial and art based, because I felt like, how can I feel like if I make it into a product, I'll be contradicting everything that I'm saying. Like, the problem is that, as of now, I would say, because as soon as I make a product, I feel like I'll be creating a demand for it. I'll be creating a space to over exploit something. What I would ideally like to do, of course, right now it's just my art practice, and I want to continue that because I'm quite interested in that, absolutely. But what I would love to do is maybe if I can, someday I have a bit more of my signature style as an artist and have like a very small range of like a product that will just be sold for just some time, limited, how you have limited editions of of this artist, something like that, because I don't want to get back into the space where I'm um, creating things and then making a demand for it, and then I have to create more and start exploiting all the sources. Because that's the problem. I mean, there's nothing wrong with creating products. There's nothing wrong with creating commerce. People need to earn. But the problem is that we tend to, in this kind of consumeristic capitalist environment that we're in, we tend to overindulge a lot. Like we tend to have more than, we tend to seek more than we need. But again, it will be very classist for me to say all of that because people also need to survive. And, we are also dealing with a larger population now than that was before, and you need all these people to survive. So, right now I would say no products. I would love to also, but I would love to collaborate with other people like designers, architects, product designers. I would love to definitely give them consultation. I would love to make it for them. Definitely nothing wrong with that. But for myself, I'm concentrating on the art for now.
Fair enough. I think maybe some responsible designer can pick up from where you leave, as like whatever your findings are through
Yeah,
your
and I
art
would
and
love to help them. I would love to help them. And I'm actually like in the process of talking with another designer, and we're trying to see like a little part of her, like she does technical textiles, so a little part of which she needs like for the circuit, like a bit of plastics. So if I could make, I would love to help people, like absolutely. But no, no products for now.
interesting. So, but are you optimistic about a future where there would be more circular fashion? And do you think that today is like the most exhilarating time for designers?
It's very interesting, the question you asked me, because this is something I used to say a lot. Like, whenever I would appear at interviews for jobs or something, and I would say, like, one of the reasons I was driven towards all these challenges, and I'm not just talking about biomaterials now. And for the longest time, like when I was in Germany, or even when I was at NIT, I was quite a rebel. Like I always wanted to work with things that don't exist and do different things. And I don't want to do this pretty textiles. So I would say like one of the reasons is I feel like it's such a great time to be alive. It's such a great time to be a designer. We are still that generation who knows what it's like to grow up without so much technology. So we know a lot of our way around the world without it, but also we are having such amazing opportunities and so many new discoveries every day. And I feel like also, if you see, if I talk about just us Indians, are we the third generations post-colonial? We are
Maybe,
probably the third
yeah.
post-colonial generations, right? So we don't have a lot of that colonial hangover our parents had. We didn't have that struggle our parents had, our grandparents had. So we are a lot more free to build a, more holistic vision of the world as we see it. So and that's why, I really encourage everyone. I'm like, don't go for something conventional. When we live in such amazing times, it's the most exciting times to be a human. And
Right.
especially for us, the privileged ones. I know a lot of people don't have their choice to have this career. I am optimistic, I would say, but I would also say I am definitely concerned with the climate emergency we are in. I'm definitely concerned with the way the because I've been in the fashion industry, I'm definitely concerned with what I've seen and I'm seeing, because I see a lot of these kids, they grow up with a smartphone and they see all these Instagram influencers, and they don't have the knowledge or the wisdom to understand that how much waste, how much it's happening behind the scenes of all those instant fashion moments. So I am a bit concerned, but I like to stay optimistic because I tell you, I get all these amazing people in my DMs, how you and I connected, and I see there are also people like us, trying to even have a conversation about it. So I am concerned. I'm just a realist, I would say. So while I'm hopeful, I'm also a bit concerned, but definitely hoping things are gonna, people are gonna be more aware of things eventually.
Right. I think that was a beautiful message to end with, and it is always a pleasure to talk to you. And we got to cover so much about biomaterials,
You
especially
know,
the spiritual side of it also. That was very interesting for me.